Captain Li Wu stood in the massive council chamber and felt smaller than he had ever felt in his life. The dome stretched high above him with walls that seemed to go on forever. 12 massive chairs formed a circle around the center where he stood alone. Each chair held one of the elder species that ruled the galaxy. Their eyes looked down at him like he was nothing more than an insect that had wandered into their meeting. The Vextari elder spoke first. His voice boomed through the chamber, making Li Wu's ears ring. "Human representative, you stand before the Galactic Council to receive new directives for your species." Li Wu had been humanity's voice to the Council for 10 years now. He had watched as they gave humans the worst jobs in the galaxy, mining dangerous asteroids, cleaning waste from alien ships, building structures on planets that would kill most other species. The humans did it all because they were told they had to earn their place among the stars. "The resource allocation protocol has been updated," the Zephyrian Council member announced. Her blue skin shimmered as she spoke. "Human colonies will now provide 80% of their industrial output to the Council. This increase is necessary for galactic stability." Li Wu felt his heart stop. 80% meant that human families would barely have enough to survive. Children would go hungry, settlements would fall apart, people would die. "Council members," Li Wu said as respectfully as he could, "this new allocation would cause severe hardship for human populations. We currently provide 60%, which already strains our resources. Perhaps we could discuss a more gradual increase." The laughter that filled the chamber was cold and cruel. The hegemon elder's tentacles writhed with amusement. "Discuss? Little human, you seem to misunderstand your position. The Council does not discuss terms with servant species. We give orders and you follow them." Ambassador Park Jin sat in the human observation area watching the proceedings. He had been working within the Council system for 30 years, believing that patience and diplomacy would eventually earn humanity respect. Now he watched as that hope crumbled before his eyes. In another part of the station, Dr. Kim Hana was finishing her research in the xenobiology lab. She had been studying genetic samples from various species for months. What she found in the archived data made her hands shake. 7 species that the Council claimed had gone extinct from natural causes showed signs of deliberate genetic manipulation. Someone had engineered diseases specifically designed to kill them. The more she dug into the classified files, the clearer the picture became. The Altarians had refused to give up their homeworld for Council expansion. 6 months later, a plague wiped them out. The Kepler colonies had developed technology that rivaled Council capabilities. A mysterious virus killed every male in their species. The Dendrites had simply asked for representation in Council decisions. They were gone within a year. Dr. Kim Hana realized she was looking at evidence of systematic genocide spanning thousands of years. The Council had been eliminating any species that showed independence or posed a threat to their control. Back in the Council chamber, Li Wu was making one final attempt at reasoning. "The human colonies on the Outer Rim are barely established. They need their resources to build basic infrastructure. Without adequate supplies, these settlements will fail. Then they will fail," the Aquarian elder said with no emotion in his watery voice. "Weak colonies that cannot meet Council demands serve no purpose. Strong colonies will adapt and survive." Commander Cho Tai was monitoring the proceedings from the human military station. His small force of defense ships was scattered across human space trying to protect mining operations and transport vessels. The humans had been allowed exactly 50 armed ships for system defense, while Council species maintained fleets of thousands. Cho Tai knew that 50 ships meant nothing if the Council decided to use force. "You have 72 hours to implement the new allocation protocol," the crystalline elder announced. "Council enforcement fleets will monitor compliance. Any colony that fails to meet the new requirements will face immediate intervention." Li Wu knew what intervention meant. Council warships would arrive and take what they wanted by force. Human resistance would be met with orbital bombardment. Settlements would be turned to glass and ash. "Council members," Li Wu said, raising his voice, "I formally request a delay of 30 days to allow human colonies time to prepare for this transition. Many of our settlements lack the infrastructure to suddenly increase output by 20%. The silence that followed was deafening. Then the Vextari elder stood up from his massive chair. His insectoid features twisted into what might have been a smile. A delay? You request that we delay council directives to accommodate human weakness? The other council members began to murmur among themselves. Some made sounds that could have been laughter. Others simply stared at Li Wu like he had said something unthinkably stupid. "Let me explain something to you, little human," the Vextari elder continued. "Your species exists in this galaxy because we allow it. You breathe because we permit it. You speak because we have not yet silenced you. The idea that you would request anything from this council shows a dangerous level of arrogance." Dr. Kim Hana had found something else in the files. References to a final protocol that would be implemented if any servant species became too troublesome to control. The details were encrypted, but the implications were clear. The council had contingency plans to eliminate entire species if they stepped out of line. She activated her personal communicator and sent an encrypted message to Captain Li Wu. "Emergency data requires immediate review. Council chamber may not be safe." Li Wu felt his communicator vibrate, but could not check it while standing before the council. The tension in the chamber was growing thicker by the minute. "Perhaps," the hegemon elder said, "the humans need a demonstration of what happens to species that make unreasonable requests. The Cygnus colonies have been experiencing some technical difficulties with their atmospheric processors. It would be unfortunate if those difficulties became permanent." The threat was clear. The Cygnus colonies housed 2 million human civilians, including thousands of children. Their atmospheric processors were the only thing keeping them alive on a world with an unbreathable atmosphere. Commander Chote received the same threat through military channels. 3 council warships had moved into position around Cygnus. Their weapons were charged and ready. The message was simple: comply or watch millions die. Ambassador Park Jin finally stood up in the observation area. His face was pale and his hands were shaking. 30 years of believing in the system had been destroyed in 30 minutes. He looked at Li Wu and gave a small nod. It was time to stop pretending that diplomacy would work. Li Wu straightened his shoulders and looked up at the 12 council members. For 10 years he had been polite and respectful and humble. He had bowed his head and accepted every insult and degradation because he believed it would protect humanity. Now he understood the truth. "I have heard the council's terms," Li Wu said in a clear, strong voice. "I will return to human space and deliver your message to my people." "Good," the Vextari elder said, settling back into his chair. "See that you emphasize the consequences of non-compliance. We would hate to see human colonies suffer from unnecessary resistance." Li Wu bowed slightly and turned to leave the chamber. As he walked toward the exit, he felt the eyes of all 12 council members watching him. They thought they had broken him. They thought humanity would submit like all the others. They were wrong. At the chamber exit, Li Wu paused and looked back at the 12 massive figures sitting in judgment over the galaxy. When he spoke, his voice carried clearly through the dome. "Council members, I want to thank you for making something very clear to humanity today. We now understand exactly where we stand in your vision of the galaxy." He turned and walked out without waiting for a response. Behind him, the council members were already discussing which human colonies to make examples of first, but Captain Li Wu was no longer listening. He had a message to deliver to humanity, and it was not the message the council expected. The age of negotiation was over. Admiral Yoon Seok received the encrypted message while his ship was docked at the Kepler station. The signal came through channels that officially did not exist and carried authentication codes that were supposed to be impossible to crack. The message was simple, but it changed everything. Council has issued impossible demands. Military preparation authorized. Execute Protocol 7. Protocol 7 had been developed in secret over the past 5 years. Only a handful of humans knew it existed, and even fewer knew what it actually meant. Admiral Yoon Seok was one of the few who understood that Protocol 7 was humanity's plan for complete withdrawal from Council space. Engineer O'Meara was working late in her laboratory when the same message arrived. She had been waiting for this day for 3 years. Around her were devices and blueprints that would have shocked the Council if they knew they existed. Humans had been secretly developing technology that broke every treaty they had signed with the galactic government. The Council believed that faster-than-light travel was limited by fundamental laws of physics that could not be overcome. They had based their entire control structure on the assumption that no species could develop better technology than what already existed. Engineer O'Meara smiled as she looked at the prototype engine that made those assumptions worthless. Intelligence. Officer Kang Bin was already in motion before the official order arrived. His network of human agents had been infiltrating council systems for years. They had been positioned as maintenance workers and data clerks and cleaning staff. Nobody paid attention to humans in menial jobs, which made them perfect spies. Within hours of the message being sent, every human in council space received new orders through channels their alien employers could not monitor. Maintenance schedules were suddenly accelerated. Data backups were performed ahead of schedule. Cleaning crews worked overnight shifts to access areas they normally could not reach. Colony Governor Nam Su began implementing evacuation procedures that had been planned for months. The human settlements on the outer rim looked like they were conducting routine supply runs and population transfers. In reality, they were moving people and equipment to hidden locations that did not appear on any council charts. The first sign that something was wrong came 3 days later, when council administrators tried to access shared databases and found them offline for maintenance. Human technicians apologized and explained that system updates were taking longer than expected. The repairs would be completed soon. A week later, council fleets discovered that human mining operations had shut down for equipment upgrades. The humans were very sorry for the inconvenience, but the new safety protocols required extensive modifications to all machinery. Work would resume as soon as possible. Admiral Yoon Seok was personally overseeing the most critical part of the operation. Human ships throughout the galaxy were quietly disappearing from council monitoring systems. They would report to their assigned positions and then simply vanish during routine hyperspace jumps. Council tracking systems showed normal departures, but the ships never arrived at their destinations. The missing vessels were actually gathering at coordinates that existed in no official star charts. Engineer O'Meara had discovered a cluster of dead systems, surrounded by natural interference that made them invisible to standard sensors. The humans had been building a secret fleet base there for 2 years. Dr. Kim Hana was working frantically to copy every piece of evidence she could find about council genocides. The files were heavily encrypted and stored on systems that would detect unauthorized access. She had to work slowly and carefully to avoid triggering security alerts. Intelligence Officer Kang Bin's agents were stealing more than just information. Human workers had access to council supply depots and maintenance facilities across the galaxy. They began taking spare parts and raw materials that would be needed to build the infrastructure for independent human colonies. The thefts were small and carefully planned to avoid detection. A few tons of rare metals here, some computer components there, medical supplies that were listed as damaged and disposed of. The council's own bureaucracy helped hide the losses in paperwork and accounting errors. Colony Governor Nam Su faced the most difficult part of the operation. Moving 2 billion humans out of council space without being detected required precise coordination. Transport ships had to follow normal trade routes while secretly carrying far more passengers than their manifests showed. Families were told they were being relocated for work assignments or colony expansion projects. Children were excited about moving to new worlds. Parents trusted that their leaders knew what they were doing. Most humans had no idea that they were actually refugees, fleeing from a war that had not yet begun. Engineer O'Meara's team completed the first batch of new engines 3 weeks after receiving the activation order. The technology was based on principles that council scientists insisted were impossible. Humans had always been told they were too primitive to understand advanced physics. The truth was that human scientists had been secretly working on theoretical problems for decades. They had made breakthroughs that would revolutionize space travel, but they had been forced to hide their discoveries. The Council did not allow servant species to develop technology that might challenge established power structures. Admiral Yoon Seok watched as the first ships equipped with the new engines performed test flights. They moved through space at speeds that should have been impossible. They could jump between star systems without using the established hyperspace routes that the Council monitored and controlled. The new technology meant that humans were no longer trapped in the cage that the Council had built around them. They could go anywhere in the galaxy without permission and without being tracked. More importantly, they could move their entire civilization beyond the reach of Council enforcement fleets. Intelligence Officer Kang Bin received reports from his agents across Council space. Human workers were disappearing from their jobs in Tibasei, growing numbers. The departures were explained as family emergencies or transfer requests, but the pattern was becoming noticeable. Council administrators were starting to ask questions about the unusual number of system failures and maintenance delays. They were also beginning to notice that their human workers seemed less cooperative than usual. Requests for overtime were being declined. Productivity was dropping mysteriously. Dr. Kim Hana finished copying the genocide files and began working on something even more dangerous. She had found references to current council plans for dealing with troublesome species. The documents were fragmentary, but they suggested that humanity was already being considered for elimination. The evidence indicated that the council had been waiting for an excuse to implement their final solution for the human problem. The new resource allocation demands were designed to be impossible to meet. When humans failed to comply, the council would have justification for extreme measures. Colony Governor Nam Su completed the evacuation of the most vulnerable settlements 2 months after the operation began. The border colonies that had been threatened with orbital bombardment were now empty, except for automated systems that made them appear occupied from a distance. The human refugees were being resettled in hidden colonies that had been under construction for years. These new worlds had been selected specifically because they were in regions of space that the Council considered worthless. They were difficult to reach and dangerous to live on, but they offered something more valuable than safety. They offered freedom. Admiral Yoon Seok received the final phase authorization as autumn arrived in Earth's northern hemisphere. The secret fleet had grown to over 300 ships, equipped with technology that surpassed anything in Council arsenals. More importantly, they had crews who were no longer willing to accept subjugation. Engineer O'Meara's production facilities were now manufacturing new weapons systems to go along with the improved engines. Human military doctrine had always been defensive because they were not allowed to build offensive capabilities. Now they were preparing for a war that would determine whether humanity survived as a free species. Intelligence Officer Kang Bin activated sleeper agents who had been placed in critical positions throughout Council infrastructure. These humans had spent years earning trust and gaining access to sensitive systems. When they received their final orders, they would be able to cause significant disruption to Council operations. The Council members were becoming increasingly frustrated with what they saw as human incompetence and unreliability. Council meetings included more frequent discussions about the need for stricter oversight of servant species. Some members suggested that humans had outlived their usefulness. Dr. Kim Hana prepared to transmit her evidence to news networks throughout the galaxy. The broadcast would reveal the true nature of Council rule and expose centuries of hidden genocides. Once the information was public, there would be no going back for either species. Colony Governor Nam Su stood on the observation deck of a transport ship and watched as the last group of human civilians departed Council space. Below them was a planet that had been home to 3 million people for over a century. Now it was empty except for the automated systems that would maintain the illusion of occupation for a few more weeks. Dr. Kim Hana activated the quantum broadcast array from the hidden research station that orbited a dead star in the void sector. The transmission would reach every inhabited system in the galaxy within hours. There would be no way for the Council to stop it or suppress it once it began. The first part of her broadcast was simple and direct. She identified herself as a human xenobiologist who had worked within Council systems for 15 years. She had access to classified archives that contained evidence of systematic genocide spanning 3,000 years of galactic history. The evidence began with the Altarians. Dr. Kim Hana displayed genetic analysis showing that the plague that killed them was not natural. Someone had engineered a virus specifically designed to target Altarian biology. The virus could not have evolved naturally and could not have been created by any species except those with advanced biotechnology. Only 3 species in the galaxy possessed the necessary knowledge to create such a weapon. The crystalline entities were silicon-based and could not work with organic compounds. The Aquarians had never developed biotechnology beyond basic levels. That left only the Vextari, who controlled the Council's biological research division. The second case was even more damning. The Kepler colonies had developed a new form of faster-than-light communication that threatened Council control over information flow. 6 months after they announced their discovery, every male in their species died from a genetic disorder that had never been seen before. Dr. Kim Hanna showed that the disorder was caused by a synthetic protein that could only have been manufactured in a laboratory. The protein was delivered through contaminated medical supplies that were distributed by Council Health Services. The timing and targeting were too precise to be accidental. Admiral Yoon Seok monitored the broadcast from his flagship, while his fleet maintained position in the shadow of a gas giant. Across the galaxy, reaction to the revelations was immediate and intense. Communication networks buzzed with activity as species that had lost allies and trading partners learned the truth about their deaths. The dendrite extinction was the most shocking revelation of all. They had been the closest thing to allies that humans had ever had in Council space. The dendrites had publicly supported giving humans greater representation in Council decisions. 2 weeks later, their homeworld was sterilized by what Council records claimed was a natural asteroid impact. Dr. Kim Hanna displayed orbital mechanics calculations that proved the asteroid had been artificially redirected. The trajectory changes required technology that only Council enforcement fleets possessed. Security footage from the dendrite system showed Council ships in the area hours before the impact. Scientist Lim Yuna joined the broadcast from a different location to reveal what humans had been developing in secret. She demonstrated a faster-than-light engine that could cross the galaxy in days rather than months. The technology was based on principles that Council scientists had declared impossible for biological species to understand. The new engines did not use the hyperspace corridors that the Council monitored and controlled. They created temporary rifts in space-time that allowed ships to move between any 2 points in the galaxy instantly. The power requirements were enormous, but humans had solved that problem with fusion reactors that were smaller and more efficient than anything in Council fleets. Scientist Lim Yuna also revealed that humans had developed weapons technology that made Council defenses obsolete. Particle beam systems that could cut through any known armor. Kinetic weapons that could strike targets from across a solar system. Defensive shields that could deflect energy weapons and absorb kinetic impacts. The third part of the broadcast focused on current Council plans. Dr. Kim Hanna had found documents that outlined preparation for something called the Human Solution. The files were heavily encrypted, but she had managed to decode enough to understand their purpose. The Council had been planning to eliminate humanity for over a year. The impossible resource allocation demands were designed to provide justification for military action. When humans failed to comply, Council fleets would sterilize every human world and colony in the galaxy. The plan was already in motion. Council enforcement fleets had been repositioned near major human population centers. Biological weapons were being prepared in Council laboratories. The extermination was scheduled to begin in less than a week. Admiral Yoon Seok smiled grimly as he listened to the panic spreading through Council communication channels. Species throughout the galaxy were demanding explanations from their Council representatives. Some were threatening to withdraw from Council membership entirely. The Rigelian delegation had just announced that they were suspending all cooperation with Council directives pending a full investigation. The Centauri Alliance was recalling their ambassador and demanding access to classified archives. Even the hegemon client species were asking uncomfortable questions about Council policies. Captain Li Wu appeared in the final segment of the broadcast, speaking from the bridge of a warship that should not have existed. Behind him were displays showing the locations of every Council military facility in the galaxy. The humans had been watching and mapping Council forces for years. Council members, Li Wu said, looking directly into the camera, you have made your intentions clear. You have decided that humanity should be eliminated because we dared to ask for fair treatment. You believe that your superior technology and numbers make this task simple. The image changed to show the hidden human fleet that had assembled in the void sector. Hundreds of ships hung in space around massive construction facilities that had been built in secret. The vessels were larger and more advanced than anything in Council arsenals. You have been mistaken about many things, Li Wu continued. You were mistaken about human technology. You were mistaken about human capabilities. Most importantly, you were mistaken about human resolve. Admiral Yoon Seok gave the order that had been planned for months. Human fleets throughout the galaxy dropped their stealth systems and appeared on every sensor screen in Council space. They had been hiding in asteroid fields and nebulae and dead systems for weeks, waiting for this moment. The Council's most heavily defended worlds suddenly found themselves surrounded by ships that had appeared from nowhere. Earth itself was protected by a fleet that materialized in the outer solar system like ghosts becoming solid. The message was clear. Humans could strike anywhere at any time. Scientist Lim Yuna demonstrated the new weapons by targeting an abandoned asteroid in a distant system. The particle beam cut through solid rock like it was made of paper. The kinetic weapons turned another asteroid into a cloud of dust and debris. The destructive power was beyond anything the Council had ever seen. "We have been preparing for this day for years," Captain Li Wu announced. "We hoped that reason and diplomacy would eventually earn us the respect we deserved. Instead, we learned that the Council sees us as insects to be crushed when we become inconvenient." The broadcast showed evidence that humans had been infiltrating Council systems for decades. Security footage revealed human agents in positions throughout Council infrastructure. Communication logs showed that humans had been monitoring Council plans and preparing countermeasures. Dr. Kim Hana returned to present the final piece of evidence. She had found records of 8 other species that had been eliminated by the Council over the past 3 millennia. Each extinction had been carefully planned and executed to look like natural disasters or evolutionary failures. The pattern was always the same. A species would develop technology or ideas that threatened Council control. They would be offered impossible choices designed to justify military action. When they refused to comply, they would be eliminated, and their deaths would be blamed on their own inadequacy. "The Council has ruled this galaxy through fear and deception for thousands of years," Dr. Kim Hana said. "They have committed genocide against any species that dared to seek independence or equality. They plan to add humanity to that list." Captain Li Wu appeared again for the final message. Behind him, Admiral Yoon Seok was visible coordinating fleet movements that would position human forces near every major Council world. The implications were clear. Humanity now had the power to do to the Council what the Council had planned to do to them. "Council members, you have 72 hours to respond to humanity's demands," Li Wu announced. "The Galactic Council will immediately dissolve and surrender authority to a democratic assembly of all species. Council leaders responsible for genocide will surrender themselves for trial." The terms were non-negotiable. There would be no bargaining or compromise. The Council could accept the demands or face the consequences of their actions. "If you refuse these terms," Li Wu continued, "humanity will take whatever action is necessary to ensure the freedom and safety of all species in this galaxy. We have the capability to enforce our will, and we have the moral authority to act." The broadcast ended with a simple message displayed in every known language. "The age of Council rule is over. The age of freedom begins now." Admiral Yoon Seok watched as panic spread through Council space. Communication networks were overloaded with emergency transmissions. Military units were being mobilized, but they had no idea where to go or what to fight. The humans were everywhere and nowhere. Fleet Admiral Yoon Seok stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the Council's response unfold across a dozen tactical displays. The 72-hour deadline had passed 6 hours ago, and the Council's answer had come in the form of weapons. Fire. 3 Council battle groups had attempted to attack human medical stations in the Outer Rim systems. The attack had been a complete disaster for the Council forces. Their ships moved like they were swimming through thick liquid compared to the new human vessels. Their weapons bounced harmlessly off human defensive shields. Within 20 minutes, all 3 battle groups had been reduced to floating debris. Commander Cho Tae coordinated the human response from his command center on the former mining station that was now humanity's primary military base. The Council had killed 200 human civilians in their attack on the medical stations. Those deaths would not go unanswered. "All fleet commanders, this is Cho Tae," he broadcast on the secured military frequency. "Operation Hammerfall is now active. Council military infrastructure is designated for immediate destruction. Rules of engagement are weapons-free for all military targets." The human fleets that had been hiding throughout Council space began their assault with surgical precision. Council shipyards exploded in brilliant flashes of light as human kinetic weapons struck them from impossible distances. Military bases that had stood for centuries were reduced to craters in minutes. Diplomat. Park Jin was working frantically to coordinate with the alien species that were abandoning their allegiance to the Council. The Rigelian Federation had officially declared independence and requested human protection from Council retaliation. The Centauri Alliance was mobilizing their own fleets to join the human forces. 3 smaller species had already signed agreements with the emerging human coalition. They brought knowledge of Council defensive systems and secret military facilities that were not marked on any official charts. Their betrayal of Council secrets was motivated by years of suppressed resentment against their former masters. The hegemony attempted to rally their client species for a counterattack against the human fleets. They discovered that most of their supposed allies were either unwilling to fight or had already switched sides. The species that had seemed loyal were revealed to have been planning rebellion for decades. Admiral Yoon Seok received reports that Council enforcement fleets were having difficulty coordinating their response. Human intelligence agents had planted viruses in Council communication systems that were causing massive data corruption. Orders were being scrambled, and false information was spreading through their networks. The Vextari attempted to use their biological weapons against human colonies, but found their targets empty. The settlements that intelligence reports claimed held millions of people were revealed to be automated decoys running on timer systems. The real human populations were safe in hidden colonies beyond Council reach. Dr. Kim Hana continued broadcasting evidence of Council crimes from her mobile transmission platform. She had found records of the Council's contingency plans for dealing with species rebellion. The documents revealed backup facilities where biological weapons were being prepared for use against any species that opposed Council rule. Commander Cho Tai received intelligence about these secret weapons facilities and immediately dispatched strike teams to neutralize them. Human special forces used the new faster-than-light engines to appear inside heavily defended installations without warning. The biological weapons were destroyed before they could be deployed. The crystalline entities attempted to negotiate a separate peace with humanity, claiming they had been forced to participate in Council genocides against their will. Admiral Yoon Seok rejected their overtures, pointing out that their species had been instrumental in developing the weapons used to eliminate other civilizations. The Aquarian delegation tried a different approach by offering to share classified information about Council military capabilities in exchange for mercy. They revealed the locations of hidden Council fleets and the technical specifications of their most advanced weapons systems. Park Jin found himself coordinating what was essentially a galactic revolution. Species that had been enemies for centuries were working together against their common oppressor. The coalition fleet grew larger every day as more civilizations declared independence from Council rule. The Council's military response became increasingly desperate as their advantages evaporated. Their superior numbers meant nothing when human ships could appear anywhere instantly and disappear just as quickly. Their defensive positions were useless against weapons that could strike from across solar systems. Commander Cho Tae authorized the destruction of the Council's primary military academy on Vega Prime. The facility had trained officers for Council enforcement fleets for over 2,000 years. Its destruction sent a clear message that the old order was finished. The Academy's orbital bombardment was broadcast live throughout the galaxy. Species that had considered the Council invincible watched as human weapons reduced their most prestigious military installation to rubble in less than an hour. The psychological impact was devastating to Council morale. Admiral Yoon Seok had to make a difficult decision when the Zephyrian home fleet attempted to surrender. The Zephyrians had been responsible for some of the worst atrocities in Council history, but they were offering to turn over their leaders for trial in exchange for survival. The surrender was accepted, but the terms were harsh. The Zephyrian military would be completely disbanded and their government would be replaced by a democratic assembly supervised by human observers. War criminals would face justice regardless of their rank or former authority. Dr. Kim Hana revealed that the Council had been planning to use a planet-killing weapon against Earth if their conventional forces failed. The device was hidden in an artificial moon orbiting the Council capital world. Human strike teams were already moving to secure the weapon before it could be activated. The artificial moon was defended by the Council's most elite forces and surrounded by automated defense systems. The battle to capture it lasted 18 hours and cost dozens of human lives. When it was over, the humans had gained access to technology that could destroy entire star systems. Park Jin received surrender offers from 5 more Council species. in a single day. The collapse of Council authority was accelerating as more civilizations realized that resistance was futile. The humans had demonstrated technological superiority that made continued fighting pointless. Commander Cho Tai faced the most challenging target of the entire campaign. The Council capital world was protected by defensive systems that had never been tested in actual combat. Hundreds of orbital platforms surrounded the planet with enough firepower to destroy entire fleets. The assault on the capital began with a demonstration of human capabilities that shocked even their allies. A single human ship appeared within the defensive perimeter and systematically destroyed every orbital platform without taking any damage. The supposedly impregnable defenses lasted less than 2 hours. The hegemon leadership attempted to evacuate the capital as human forces approached the planet. They were intercepted by human ships that had been waiting in hyperspace for exactly this scenario. The Council leaders found themselves trapped with nowhere to run. Admiral Yoon Seok broadcast a message to the remaining Council forces as human troops prepared to land on the capital world. The terms were simple: immediate surrender or complete destruction. There would be no negotiation and no compromise. Council forces, you have seen what human technology can accomplish, Yoon Seok announced. Your leaders chose genocide over cooperation. Your fleets chose violence over peace. Now you will face the consequences of those decisions. The remaining Council military units began surrendering in massive numbers. Ship captains who had served the Council for decades decided that loyalty was not worth dying for. Entire battle groups switched sides rather than face destruction by human weapons. Dr. Kim Hana broadcast the final piece of evidence that sealed the Council's fate. She had found records of planned genocides against 23 species that were scheduled for elimination over the next century. The Council had been preparing for systematic murder on an unprecedented scale. The evidence included detailed biological analysis of potential target species and technical specifications for weapons, designed to exploit their genetic weaknesses. Every major civilization in the galaxy would have eventually faced extinction if the Council had been allowed to continue their plans. Commander Cho Tai received reports that human forces had secured the Council archives and captured most of the senior leadership. The trials for genocide and crimes against sapient species would begin as soon as temporary tribunals could be established. Park Jin was already working on frameworks for the Democratic Assembly that would replace Council rule. Representatives from 47 species had expressed interest in participating in a government based on equality rather than domination. The Council's 3,000-year reign of terror was ending not with a whimper, but with the complete collapse of everything they had built. Their superior technology had been surpassed. Their military might had been shattered. Their authority had been rejected by the very species they had sought to control. President Li Wu stood before the assembled representatives of 49 species in the Great Hall that had once served as the Council's chamber of domination. The massive chairs that had towered over lesser beings had been removed and replaced with simple seats arranged in a circle. No species would sit higher than any other in the new Galactic Assembly. The transformation of the former Council capital had taken 6 months to complete. Human engineers had worked alongside alien technicians to redesign the entire complex as a symbol of equality rather than oppression. The building that had once inspired fear now welcomed visitors from across the galaxy. Admiral Yoon Seok maintained his position as commander of the Alliance Defense Force, but his role had changed dramatically. Instead of preparing for war, his fleets now protected trade routes and defended smaller species from pirates and raiders. The human military had become a force for peace rather than conquest. The trials of former Council leaders had concluded 3 weeks earlier with convictions for genocide and crimes against sapient species. 8 former Council members faced life, imprisonment on prison worlds where they would have time to contemplate the suffering they had caused. 3 species had been found guilty of systematic murder and faced supervised rehabilitation. Dr. Kim Hana had been appointed to head the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that was documenting the full extent of Council atrocities. Her work had revealed evidence of crimes that spanned 3,000 years and affected nearly every species in the galaxy. The healing process would take generations to complete. The Free Species Alliance Charter had been signed by 43 civilizations, with 6 more requesting membership pending review of their applications. The charter established principles that would have been unthinkable under council rule. No species could claim superiority over others, and all civilizations had the right to self-determination. Ambassador Park Jin had spent months negotiating the complex details of the new government structure. The assembly operated on consensus rather than domination, with decisions requiring agreement from at least 60% of member species. Military action required approval from 75% of members. The economic transformation had been equally dramatic. Under council rule, resources had flowed upward to benefit the ruling species, while servant civilizations struggled with artificial scarcity. The new system promoted free trade and mutual assistance between species with natural gifts and capabilities. Colony. Governor Nam Su had overseen the establishment of refugee settlements for species whose homeworlds had been damaged by council policies. Humans shared their advanced terraforming technology to help restore devastated planets and create new homes for displaced populations. The Rigelian Federation had become humanity's closest ally in the new alliance. Their mathematical genius complemented human engineering skills to create technologies that neither species could have developed alone. Joint research projects were producing innovations that benefited all member civilizations. President Li Wu addressed the assembly on the first anniversary of the council's dissolution. His speech was broadcast throughout the galaxy and translated into hundreds of languages so that every sapient being could understand the message of freedom and hope. 1 year ago, this galaxy was ruled by fear and oppression, Li Wu began. Species lived in terror of extinction if they dared to seek independence or equality. The strong dominated the weak and called it natural order. The audience included representatives from species that had been mortal enemies under council rule. The Aquarians sat beside the crystalline entities despite centuries of territorial disputes. Former client species worked together with their previous masters to build a better future for all. Today, we have proven that cooperation is stronger than domination, Li Wu continued. We have shown that diversity makes us stronger rather than weaker. We have demonstrated that justice is more powerful than oppression. Engineer O'Meara had established the Alliance Technology Council to coordinate research and development across member species. Her breakthrough faster-than-light engines were being shared freely with all civilizations, regardless of their technological development level. The artificial barriers that had limited progress under council rule were being dismantled. The former council worlds had been transformed into centers of learning and culture rather than instruments of control. The Vexitari homeworld now hosted the Alliance Medical Research Institute, where species worked together to cure diseases and extend lifespans. Their expertise in biological sciences was being used to heal rather than harm. Scientist Lim Yuna had been appointed to lead the Alliance Defense Research Division, but her mission was fundamentally different from the weapons development of the Council era. Her team focused on defensive technologies and humanitarian applications of advanced science. Commander Chotai had disbanded the human military units that had fought the Liberation War and integrated their personnel into the Alliance Defense Force. The new military was designed to protect rather than conquer, with strict rules of engagement that prohibited offensive action except in cases of verified genocide. The economic prosperity that followed the end of council rule exceeded all projections. Trade between species increased by 300% in the first year as artificial restrictions were eliminated. Innovation flourished when civilizations were free to pursue their own technological development. Dr. Kim Hana's commission had documented over 200 attempted genocides during the council era with varying degrees of success. The evidence had been compiled into a permanent archive that would serve as a warning to future generations about the dangers of unchecked power. The rehabilitation programs for former council species were showing encouraging results. The hegemony had voluntarily dismantled their military hierarchy and established democratic institutions modeled on alliance principles. Their former aggression was being redirected toward peaceful exploration and scientific research. President Li Wu concluded his anniversary address with a reflection on the lessons learned from humanity's struggle for freedom. The galaxy had discovered that no species was inherently superior to others, and that diversity was a source of strength rather than division. We have learned that tyranny contains the seeds of its own destruction, he said. The council believed that fear would keep species in line forever. Instead, it created the conditions for its own downfall. The alliance had faced challenges during its first year, but none that could not be overcome through patience and cooperation. Territorial disputes were resolved through mediation rather than warfare. Resource conflicts were settled through negotiation and compromise. Admiral Yoon Seok had restructured the defense force to reflect alliance values. The largest ships were search and rescue vessels, equipped to respond to natural disasters and humanitarian crises. The weapons that had defeated the Council were being converted to peaceful purposes. The Alliance Charter included provisions for dealing with species that chose to remain outside the new system. The few civilizations that rejected membership were left alone, as long as they did not threaten others. Isolation was considered a valid choice that should be respected. Education had become a priority throughout Alliance space, with species sharing knowledge and teaching methods that had been closely guarded under Council rule. Young beings from different civilizations learned together in integrated schools that promoted understanding and friendship. Colony Governor Nam Su had established a cultural exchange program that allowed individuals from different species to experience life in alien societies. The program was breaking down prejudices and stereotypes that had been fostered by centuries of Council propaganda. The former Council archives had been opened to researchers from all member species who were working to understand how tyranny had been able to dominate the galaxy for so long. The goal was to identify warning signs that might prevent future dictatorships from gaining power. President Lee Wu faced questions about humanity's role in the new galaxy during his final speech to the Assembly. Some species had suggested that humans should take the leadership position that the Council had once held. Others worried about exchanging one form of domination for another. Humanity seeks no special position in this alliance, Lee Wu declared. We fought for freedom, not for the right to rule others. Leadership of the alliance will rotate among member species so that no civilization becomes too comfortable with power. The rotation system had been established to prevent any single species from accumulating too much influence. Each member civilization would have the opportunity to guide alliance policy for a limited term before passing responsibility to another species. Dr. Kim Hana announced that the Truth and Reconciliation Commission had completed its primary mission of documenting Council crimes. The evidence would be preserved in museums and educational centers throughout the galaxy to ensure that future generations understood the price of tyranny. The final gesture of the anniversary celebration came when a former Council elder requested permission to address the Assembly. The Aquarian who had once voted for human extermination now stood before the representatives of free species to ask for forgiveness. We were taught that strength meant domination, and that mercy was weakness, the former elder said.